So first inevitable question is generally, who are you and what is this? Well, during my undergrad, year before last, I was doing a placement year and was actually spent the time as a construction site manager. And it was working on the construction sites, looking at the huge amount of things that were going on there, the large scale, this was a very large scale project, and the large scale issues that were on the site, and how I thought we really needed new technologies to come along and to be used that are available on such projects, but aren't really being utilized at the moment. So you've got things such as, tracking of the movement of the operatives. So we had about 250 operatives on the site at any one time, but we didn't truly know where everybody was or what they were all working on. I thought this was an area that was lacking. So I decided that I wanted that kind of world to be my day-to-day working world. So I went back to do my final year, and I decided to make my project kind of technology and construction based. The technology I was sort of caught my interest at the time was blockchain. So I wrote the paper on studying blockchain and how that could enable more circularity and sustainability within the construction industry, from improving the tracking of all the things that we put into buildings to allow us to take them out and put them back into new buildings, rather than just basically gluing our buildings together and binning them, which is sort of our current not very sustainable model. So graduate from that last year, and as I said, decided to start teaching myself some computer science, data science, and computer programming, which is kind of how we ended up here. Doing lots of online courses is probably the path many people seem to take with this. Code Academy was the one that I've found myself using, because I got a great membership through that. But I thought there's only so much you can really do with just tutorials. So I wanted to find myself a real life project, find myself a data set, and put some of the skills to use and just see what I could explore, what I could find from a data set that nobody had presented to me and nobody had set out any tasks for. So I went on to Kaggle, which is probably the place most people would go for totally random data sets. And I wanted to find something a little bit different, because you had many of them in there which were kind of not uninteresting topics, but kind of normal topics that you see come up. It was things like loads of COVID data, virus data, temperatures. But then I saw something which caught my eye, which is actually a whole load of data from the OK Cupid dating profiles. So I thought, okay, that's a little bit different. What are we gonna? It's a bit different to tracking viruses and COVID stats, which can get a bit depressing at times. So I decided to jump in that and see what I found. And it turned out to be a really rich data set. Well, for me as a beginner, I think possibly others would think so as well. Larger than I'd had to work with before. So it's about 60,000 entries and a huge number of variables per entry within that. So everything from numerical entries, sort of like age, income, then you've got marital status, sexual orientations, religions. But what I found most interesting, and hadn't looked at anything before, was there were, for each profile, there was up to 10 short answer questions. They called them essays. They weren't really essay-like. They were more sort of few to 250 characters. But you could have about 10 of these per profile, so that times nearly 60,000 ended up being quite a large amount of language to go through. I think once I removed some of the stop words from that, it was it was over 250,000 words to manipulate and start processing by the end of it, which was way larger than anything I'd looked at so far, and hadn't done any language processing. So being me, I have to jump into the most difficult task. So what did I do in the build? So as with most things we probably do, just Google it to start with. Like, can I make a word cloud out of these things? Can I do that in Python? So I thought that would be quite a good graphical way of looking what's in there. Can we see what are the most common, what do people talk about most on these in their dating profiles? So yeah, some Google searches, Stack Overflow queries, and I think it was Data Camp. I think it was ended up finding quite a full tutorial on how to take all your data and create a word cloud out of this. So the first part of it was filtering just the essays out of the rows in each section, tokenizing and then removing the stop words from that. So that is taking, say, an essay or a paragraph, which would be like one item, and then breaking that down in just a list of individual words. Then removing the stop words, so things like I've, I, they, like, and, the, and popping that all into a large dictionary, counting the number of words, counting the number of occurrences of each of those words, and then populating it into the graphic word cloud to finish. Ton of issues. I think start picking this up. I'll go through more of those a bit later on, but it was things like picking and learning the packages was quite difficult, because usually, again, I'd found pre-suggested packages or preloaded libraries that have been suggested by the really neatly organized online tutorial. So just trying ones, just pip install for something I've never tried out before, and finding the syntax for all of those was fun, but mind-boggling, and took a lot of walks around the block to kind of clear my head afterwards. When it did work, it ended up being massive and taking like 2 hours to run on my laptop to do the whole thing. So I needed to solve that. But again, through talking to people, doing searches, put more queries up, you find some quite cool solutions. So from 2-something hours, finding that I could actually put .apply to the whole data frame, which is what I was keeping all of the data in. I think I dropped it to something like sub 20 seconds for the whole process, which is really exciting to do. So the results. So I left my note in for what was the my placeholder of the slide, because I actually just laughed, ended up thinking of what I was going to create with this when I came up with the idea for the talk, and then seeing the final blurry PNG file that actually came out by the end of all of the hours of fiddling on it. Yeah, I had this idea that this is going to be my showpiece slide. I was going to have some awesome like Tableau style interactive dashboard with all the data I found in it. But no, I thought that was actually part of the fun bit of the lesson, was actually just seeing, yeah, what you actually learn in the process, and got a whole new appreciation for processing and everything that even just goes behind, what you put into a search engine, or predictive text, or summaries that we get now of whole documents. But well, anyway, the results of the data, just to cover that, was perhaps quite unsurprising, actually, thinking through it. I mean, main things we have in there are, friends, music, family, books, movies. But it's quite an interesting tool to look at, actually, where my programming model was actually lacking as well, because you can still see things in there like, really, would, I'll with no apostrophe, I've. So it was, yeah, creating the vision, and then really appreciating, how much you really have to put into it, and the size of the learning curve from kind of going to blank project right through to final blurry PNG file. So what was the learning curve, which is partly what I thought I'd come up and share as a kind of self-starter in this. Accessing the data was a challenge, because you have, I suppose in many of the tutorials you get, it is just one, you put in your paragraph, you copy that in, and you put that. Whereas actually I had 60,000 rows. I think it just began in a CSV file. So then wanted to convert that into something I was a bit more familiar with, something I could sort of use more powerful tools on. yeah, it wasn't just one piece of text, and there was a bit of excitement drop when I realized that I had got the whole thing to run, and then I had only processed the first of the sort of 60,000 rows in the whole thing, and realized there was many thousands still to go, which required a whole new program or program elements to it. And that's when I found it was actually going to take about 2.5 hours to run at that point. So yeah, that was it. Nested loops equals hours and hours of runtime. How to remove the punctuation, the stop words. It was not quite as simple as just importing the dictionary to it. And I think there are some probably ways I would go back and try and flip things around. I think the order has perhaps confused it. Maybe supposed to put A for B and B for A instead. We'll try later on. Not today, don't worry. Yeah, formatting the picture to get it to match the colors of this is really, really hard. I thought, yeah, that'd be, at least I can make that part of my sort of like slick presentation element of it. But trying to change the colors of word cloud is the most, I can say, is easily the most complicated part of the whole thing, was just changing the colors on it. I don't understand why it's so hard. That is still to learn. But I suppose also actually by the end of it, getting the words, I thought, well, I mean, the words don't really actually give us the insight I wanted in the end. Possibly it would now be, can we expand it to start looking at phrases? Can you start picking out group terms of things that will say, I really enjoy particularly, or it could be, you know, I mean, friends was the most common word. It could be, I'm actually sick of all of my friends and just want to meet somebody instead. So friends on its own, does it really give us any context other than it's frequently used? So yeah, the insight from just jumping in and doing this has been so much more than just doing the online tutorials. What would I progress with it? I think I've covered some of it already, but you could do, yeah, tidy up the stop word removal, look for phrases instead. When that's all smooth, you could create more filters to could you start looking at the themes by demographic, because this was a global group, predominantly states, but you could look at Europe, America, what are the different stares there, male, female, income demographics, which is why I was quite excited. It was such a rich set. I saw all of this before I realized how hard it was to actually produce like the whole language processing. Yep, could make it into some, you know, factor it into some other tools, learn a whole new set of skills with a bit of web development as well. So yeah, if you like what I've been doing, I do a bit of freelance work, also looking to just get more out into the industry. If you liked it, anything I've mentioned, or just want to chat about it a bit more, get in touch. And thanks very much for sitting through the presentation.